Okay, problem solving with peanuts and sweet potatoes. Okay, for years, farmers in Alabama grew cotton and nothing else. As a result, they had damaged fields and could no longer cultivate crops. The fields broke down from planting the same crops year after year. Then in 1914, a pest called a boll weevil destroyed crops. The solution to this problem came from George Washington Carver, an African American scientist and inventor. Carver was born in 1864 to enslaved parents who worked on a farm. He was often sick as a child and could not work in the field. Instead, Carver worked in the kitchen garden and learned how to make simple medicines out of herbs. Carver also became interested in plants and how they grew. As a boy, Carver told local farmers how to grow healthier plants in their own gardens. In 1891, Carver went to college in Iowa. He studied agriculture, the science of farming. He learned about different types of plants and the soil in which they grew. He also learned about the animals and insects that ate crops. All this knowledge became useful when the farmers in Alabama needed help. Carver discovered that the soil in Alabama could grow over other types of plants, such as peanuts and sweet potatoes. So he introduced the idea of crop rotation to the farmers. Crop rotation is the practice of growing different types of crops on the same land in consecutive seasons. Not only does this practice help reduce soil erosion, but it also introduces different nutrients into the soil. The result is better, healthier soil and more crops. Carver suggested that the farmers begin by growing peanuts because it was an easy crop to grow. In addition, the peanuts would reintroduce important nutrients to the soil that had vanished after years of growing just cotton. The farmers were hesitant at first, but decided to follow Carver's plan. They began growing peanuts and sweet potatoes on their farms. And then you can see that there's this little graphic organizer here. I don't think I need to read that to you guys. You guys can see that. The plan was a success. However, another problem soon emerged. Although crop rotation helped the soil and produced peanuts and sweet potatoes, customers did not buy these foods. Some farmers had so many peanuts that they were forced to place them in storehouses where they sat and rotted. Carver responded to the situation with more research. He locked himself in his laboratory for an entire week, experimenting with peanuts. By the end of the week, he had developed several products that could be made from peanuts. He also created several brochures telling the public about these new products. As a result, sales of peanuts went through the roof. Carver continued to experiment and made products from peanuts and sweet potatoes. He made 300 other things from peanuts, such as flour, milk, ink, and dye. During World War I, Carver worked with Henry Ford to create a replacement for rubber that was created from peanuts. In addition, Carver made about 100 products from sweet potatoes. Some of these products included glue, ink, and breakfast cereal. He also developed a substitute for coffee. In addition, Carver created a brochure about the nutritional value of the two foods and even shared a few recipes. By 1940, peanuts became the second leading crop to make money in the South. Carver changed how cotton was grown and made many other crops important to the South. This is a photo, and the caption underneath says, Carver Center with members of Tuskegee Institute Agricultural Department in Alabama. Carter was invited by prominent educator and author Booker T. Washington to head the university's agricultural department, where he taught farming techniques for 47 years. He and his research assistants experimented with soil chemistry and researched new uses for crops. And then we go down to our questions. Now, answers numbers 1 through 5 base your answers on the passage, problem solving with peanuts and sweet potatoes. Number 1, what does cultivate mean as it is used in paragraph 1? A, sell. B, grow. C, talk about. Or D, understand. You can pause this and then restart it when you've answered the question. Number 2, this question has 2 parts. First answer part A, then answer part B. Part A, what is the role of the diagram in the passage? A, to compare crops and products. B, to show crops farmers sell. C, to describe types of crops. Or D, to explain crop rotation. Part B, which sentence from the passage supports the answer in Part A? A, for years, farmers in Alabama grew cotton and nothing else. B, crop rotation is the practice of growing different types of crops on the same land in consecutive seasons. C, some farmers had so many peanuts that they were forced to place them in storehouses where they sat and rotted. D, some of these products included glue, ink, and breakfast cereal. 3, how do the photographs and captions contribute to an understanding of the passage? You're supposed to select 2 options, 2 answers. A, they show that Carver overcame many challenges in his lifetime. B, they show how Carver became interested in the field of agriculture. C, they show that Carver was highly respected in the field of agriculture. D, they show how Carver was able to convince farmers to rotate their crops. E, they show that Carver had a team of researchers to assist him in his work. Select 2. Number 4, what does responded mean as it's used in paragraph 7? A, gave up. B, repeated. C, answered in some way. Or D, succeeded in some way. Number 5, it says explain how the author uses a problem and solution text structure. Use 2 details from the passage to support your answer. This is a race strategy question, so you are going to have to use RACE to answer it. Don't forget to do that. You can use your red folder with the race strategy cheat sheet in there if you would like to. Okay, the next passage is written in stone. People need to communicate. The earliest human beings most likely communicated with sound and gestures. Eventually, groups of people develop languages which can express long or complicated messages that people cannot get across by just making sounds or by pointing. With language, people can have dialogues in which they communicate back and forth. As cultures grew in different parts of the world, a new kind of problem arose as human interaction became more sophisticated. Because people were trading goods with each other, spoken language was not enough to answer every question or settle every dispute. People needed to communicate in a different way, so people began to write. The earliest writing. Some of the earliest known writing was found in Egypt. It was a list of items delivered to a temple written on bone and ivory using Egyptian hieroglyphs or symbols that represented consonants. This list dates to about 3200 BC. At about the same time, the ancient Sumerians were drawing pictures of animals on wet clay in Mesopotamia. These symbols represented syllables. The clay, left to bake in the sun, would then become a permanent record of the temple's goods. For thousands of years, people continued to draw pictures on stone and make marks in clay. Eventually, the heavy clay and stone tablets became a nuisance, so people developed ways to make writing more portable. They began writing on papyrus, made using plant material, or parchment, made using dry animal skin. So that records so that records could be easily transported. Historians believe that people did all of this so that they could better communicate with one another and to pass their history down to future generations. As cultures became more complex, people began trading over longer and longer distances. The Phoenicians, for example, navigated long distances overseas to trade ivory and cedar. They developed a new way of writing around 1500 BC. It was based on something similar to words rather than pictures. Our modern phonics and phonetics have roots in this method of writing. Changing and dying out. Linguists are people who study language. They can tell you that languages change. If you look at something written in English 700 years ago, you would be surprised at how difficult it is to read. The structure of the language was different. Some of the words look familiar, but many seem strange. The shapes of some Old English letters are very different from the way you learn to write them. Languages can also disappear. A language or a form of writing dies out when there are no longer enough people who understand and use it. This happened to the ancient Egyptian hieroglyphs. The Egyptians covered the walls of their immense temples and tombs with stories about their gods, goddesses, and pharaohs. But by the 5th century AD, hardly anyone could read those hieroglyphs. Most scholars believed that hieroglyphs were just pictures. They thought each symbol stood for an idea or a thing. But when the Rosetta Stone was found in 1799, clues started to fall into place. The Rosetta Stone is a tablet on which information was written in 3 different forms: in hieroglyphs, in an Egyptian script called Demotic, and in Greek. By studying the tablet, experts could begin to solve the problem of deciphering hieroglyphs. In 1822, a young Frenchman named Jean-Francis Champollion figured out that almost all the hieroglyphs stood for sounds, not ideas or things, and that discovery solved the riddle of the stone. Language today. Language is still changing as people experience new things, new words are invented, and the meanings of old words shift. Much of our writing is done on computers or other electronic devices. Some people predicted that our use of paper would die out as computers took over. They imagined a paperless world, but that prediction has not yet come true. We still put a lot of our writing on paper. Even though electronic books, magazines, and newspapers may now be available, paper will be with us for a long, long time to come. And then you have your timeline here on the next page. Take a couple minutes and look at this. This is basically what I just read with you in a timeline form. You can see it goes from 3500 BC all the way down to 1500 AD. And then the questions. Number 6, what does dispute mean as it's used in paragraph 2? A, disagreement. B, explanation. C, idea. D, solution. Fill in the bubbles to match each piece of information with the section of the passage in which it appears. So you have the earliest writing, changing and dying out, and language today. So the Phoenicians developed a writing system. Which part would the Phoenicians developing a writing system be in the early writing? Would it be in the changing and dying out, or would it be in the language today? You pick one of those choices. Same thing for the Rosetta Stone is discovered. Which one would you put? D, E, or F? People communicate using electronic devices. G, H, or I? People communicate using papyrus. J, K, and L. Number 8, what does portable mean as it's used in paragraph 5? A, easy to read. B, easy to deliver. C, used to impress others. Or D, displayed in public places. Part B, which phrase from paragraph 5 hints at the meaning of portable? A, make marks on clay. B, made using plant material. C, could be easily transported. Or D, down to future generations. Number 9, what are 2 ways in which the timeline supports the passage? A, it explains some of Champollions. I think I said it right the first time, but it explains his other accomplishments. B, it outlines specific dates of events discussed in the passage. C, it provides more detail about the writing on the Rosetta Stone. D, it shows when English was developed compared to language discussed in the passage. Or E, it introduces other languages not discussed in the passage that led to that development of English. You're supposed to pick 2 ways, so 2 answers for that, for number 9. Number 10 has 2 parts. How does the author use a problem and solution text structure to explain why people first started writing? A, by explaining that heavy tablets were causing problems. B, by explaining problems that spoken languages could not solve. C, by explaining how writing prevented languages from dying out. Or D, by explaining that scholars had difficulty understanding early writing. Part B, which sentence from the passage supports the answer in part A? A, because people were trading goods with each other, spoken language was not enough to answer every question or settle every dispute. B, as culture became more complex, people began trading over longer and longer distances. C, if you looked at something written in English 700 years ago, you would be surprised at how difficult it is to read. Or D, the shapes of some old English letters are very different from the way you learned to write them. And that's it. The test is finished at that point. So please make sure that you've checked your answers and you've answered all the questions. And if you've skipped the race strategy, you need to go back and you need to make sure you finish the race strategy before you turn it in. And then when you turn it in, you want to go ahead and look up at the board and make sure you are working on your mustards, ketchups, and pickles for the rest of the time period. Thank you.